what would you say is the first step in scaling performance marketing?
Whenever we're thinking about scaling for performance marketing, let's say we have to have some targets in place. That's the very first thing I think about. How are we actually measuring what we're scaling? So let's say we're going to be starting working with a new app. The very first thing we'll always do is start running app install campaigns, first of all. So very top of funnel, get people to download, figure out what messages are working, what creatives are working with that, so that people can start to come through, the algorithms can start to learn, we can start to learn as well, like our human intelligence can start to learn which kind of things are performing well. And then as we go further and we're able to spend more and more, we start moving farther down the funnel. So from install to sign up, from sign up to trial, and then to some custom events. And as we start to unlock more budget by bringing back more money into that with our subscription product, we're able to get better results, especially since the kind of iOS changes, which we're all very familiar with, I'm sure. You need to have a bit of a different strategy. You have to get a certain number of installs per day to see post-install events. So you need to be spending at a certain level to be able to optimize for that and so on. So the very first thing I'd be looking for is, what are my targets? What are my optimization events I'm aiming for? If I'm already optimizing for trial, is there something else that can be a custom event like trial and 2 content views, or trial and something that we can start looking at that will be a really clear indicator for success and for someone going on to purchase and succeed?
How are you experimenting with creatives and trying different things these days, especially in the post-ATT world? What's working?
I think whenever we're working with companies, we say that we only really start with a minimum of like 6K budget at the moment. That's the very, very minimum based on what an average cost per install would be. And this is only to optimize on installs right from the very beginning. And so the reason I say that is because to optimize any campaign or any ad set, you need to get 50 conversions a week in your first 7 days of launching. So that's your first hurdle. Can I get my 50 conversions in a week, firstly? So am I able to hit that point? So if you're going to get 50 conversions in a week, divided by 7, you have to get 7 per day. So imagine, like, to begin with, the cost per install is going to cost you around £5, $5 whilst you're getting started. So that's what we say is the minimum entry point that we then try and come down from. So that then allows you for a few different test variants and then one prospecting campaign. So the way that we're doing all of our experiments really are having tests with one control and then multiple variants, which are like one element different from each of them. So if we're testing a messaging test, we will have the exact same design, but with 4 different messages on there against a control. Which one of these messages will be our control? Once we then find out which message works best, we'll take that one message and put it into 4 different concepts, like 4 different design concepts. So that could be like a SMS conversation, an iMessage conversation. That could be like an iOS notes fake conversation. That could be a UGC style. That could be many other different things with this one message to see if, does this message actually hold up on its own in different formats? We then see which format works best and start exploring that a bit more with different iterations, with messaging iterations within that as well. So this is really how we get started. And as we're starting to scale, we're repeating this process over and over and over and over and over again until we start finding a lot of different creative concepts that are working, and we're upgrading, we're putting these into our always on campaigns and then leaving them and trying to touch them as little as possible. We're trying to keep our hands off those ones. And that's half of the job, not trying to interfere too much with those. So that's really the baseline. And as we start to see success there, and we're starting to see success on the app install format, optimizing only for app installs, then we would think about, okay, now we've got this portfolio of creatives that's working. Now we're going to start optimizing for something else. So we would duplicate that campaign and then optimize it for registration, optimize it for trial, optimize it for our custom event that we spoke about earlier. See which one of those performs better. Are we even able to get to the point where we're able to optimize for post-install events? Because you need to be getting a certain amount of installs per day then. So you change from 50 in a week to like 120 in a day that you need to get for your one campaign. So it's a big step increase there, 50 in a week to 120 in a day. So when you're doing that, you need to be ready to increase your budgets dramatically without knowing. So we try and do this very, very gradually with a lot of control, with a lot of experimentation and a lot of analysis going into it, because we need to make sure that this budget increase is sustainable as well. It's fine to put it up for a test, but can we sustain this budget level? Because the way it works with the SK ad network is you might have this one campaign set up in Meta and it's just got one campaign ID in Meta, but actually in the SK ad network, it has like 10 campaign IDs. And so inside then the SK ad network, you need each of your campaign IDs to get a certain amount of installs to get the postbacks. So then if you are going even underneath that average, some of the postbacks will be empty, then you'll be starting to miss data and so on. So even though I'm saying, you have to reach 120 or so, it's actually making sure that that is the very, very minimum to be able to get postbacks. So unless you're hitting that, you're not going to be seeing data visibility. And so that's when we're starting to make sure that we're also looking in our MMP, in our mobile measurement partner. So in like AppsFlyer or Just or Singular or something like this, because at the moment with some of our companies, we're seeing 60% visibility or so in Facebook, in Meta, versus what we see in our MMP. So we actually look at that as our source of truth. Are we seeing the results that we need to see in our MMP? We're judging our success there and then scaling based on that too.
Yeah. Do you see just like wildly different performance? And then what would you advise on the lower performance? Do you immediately jump back into product, or do you look for ways to get that cost down or other things?
Well, the very first thing that I'd be looking at is everything from a blended perspective. So did I get 3,000 from my paid, or did I get 3,000 overall? So if I'm getting 3,000 overall from a blended perspective, I would be first looking at all of my funnel steps. So where are my biggest areas for opportunity? So this then goes into product. So firstly, I'd be looking at everything from CPMs to clicks to how people are installing, how are people registering, are people actually opening after that install actually? Are they registering? Are they taking out the trial? And then the trials to paid conversion. So I would have kind of internal benchmarks of what these can be, what we should be aiming for here for subscription apps with trials and so on. So then from there, we would look at, okay, which area is letting us down? Are our CPMs really high? Is our click-through rate really low? If that was the case, or even if our click to install was low, I'd be looking at our ads definitely. Where can we improve here? Which ads are letting us down? Has something started to saturate? Are there any new directions that we should be testing? How are people engaging on these ads and so on? And if everything's looking fine there, then I would be looking into the product. So are people, whenever we're thinking about installs, we have this kind of true install, which is actually the number of people that went to the App Store and clicked install. But then there is also your first app open install,
Right.
which is what we track in most of our business intelligence tools or in our analytics tools. So actually, I was working with one product and we saw that only 70% of people were doing the first app open after the true install. So we were like, okay, this is interesting. Obviously then we have to zoom out. Is this something on the App Store page? Is this something on the ads? Is this something on like how we're communicating? Like what can we do here to push people further? Should we be retargeting people who've installed but not opened? And so on. So there's a few different things that you can do there. But then if people are actually opening your app, then I'd be looking at what's our registration rate? How are people taking out the trial and going into the product itself to see where are, again, our areas for improvement, where are our biggest opportunities, and then focusing there. And actually that can mean sometimes pausing your ads till you fix problems.